You're eating mold. No, seriously, you eat mold all the time. Do you ever eat this? Or this? Or this? Or this? Or this? Or this? Then you're eating mold, or a product that couldn't be made without mold. Without a specific mold. Aspergillus oryzae, better known by its Japanese name, koji. It's used to make soy sauce or shoyu, miso paste, sake, and soju, as many people know, but it's also instrumental in making corn syrup, citric acid, and powerful enzymes that themselves can be used to create huge, unique flavors in everyday cooking. And today, I'm going to show you some koji that I grew, right here in the Phaewild lab. It may not be a mushroom, but koji is a fungus, and can be grown with a lot of the same equipment I use for the mushroom farm, plus a little scrappiness and creativity. And it's really easy, and gives you an endless supply of the world's most versatile food fungus. This video isn't meant to be a full tutorial. There are plenty of those out there, and I learned what I was doing from YouTubers like Johnny Youngho and Eddie Shepherd. Check out their channels for instructions. Instead, I'm going to give a high-level overview of what koji is and some of the hacks I used to make it from stuff I already had around the house. Let's get started. Alright, so what is koji? Well, it's a mold, or rather a family of molds, in genus Aspergillus. It's a fungus, so it reproduces through spores, and it's a relative to the common molds that you've seen growing on old grains in the back of your fridge. But unlike those wild molds, this strain has essentially been domesticated for safety and utility. While it rose to fame through thousands of years of Japanese culinary ingenuity, it's now used to make nearly all the soft drinks and sour candy in the world, making it something nearly every human consumes every day. While that citric acid is produced by a different species of koji than the one I'm showing you today, the process for growing them is the same. It may be intimidating to think about growing a mold intentionally, especially one used by fancy food scientists at billion-dollar companies. But it's a simple and straightforward process. First, you cook a grain. Basically any grain will do, but it's most commonly grown on rice. Then you inoculate that grain, either with a tiny amount of koji spores, called koji-kin in the industry, or a larger amount of already colonized koji grains. But since molds and bacteria share a lot of their preferred growth environments, the tricky part is making sure you only grow the Aspergillus mold you're trying to grow, and not one of its toxic relatives or a bacteria that might outcompete it for the starches in the grain. Sounds scarier than it is. Again, this has been done safely for thousands of years, and the technique is to warm the grains to 88 degrees Fahrenheit and hold them there while the spores germinate and mycelium spreads. That's actually the middle of the range where koji is comfortable, so it will grow anywhere from about 80 to 96 degrees without too much trouble. If things get too hot, we're talking about 104 degrees or higher, you'll cook the mycelium and stall the grow. And if things get too cool, they'll slow down so much that your grains may dry out before the mold can colonize them. The pros use a specially built koji buta, a cedar box made to hold moisture and heat and gently perfume the grains with the wood's aroma. But you can do it however you want, really, as long as you get that consistent 88 degrees. This is a bit of an odd temperature to achieve at home, though. Your oven likely can't hit that in between. Plus, ovens are very dry, and you want to maintain the moisture of your grains without making them soupy. So, home growers often create a water bath with an immersion circulator. You may know this contraption by the name of the technique it's most associated with: sous vide. But that literally translates from French as under vacuum, referring to the vacuum-sealed bags commonly used to cook things in a heated water bath like this. But koji literally breathes, so we won't use the vacuum sealer here, just the immersion circulator. Your kit will almost certainly vary from mine, so I won't do a deep dive into my setup. The TLDR is that I used a cheap plastic cooler to hold the water. It's winter and I did this in the garage lab, so I needed the insulation. But in summer this can be done in a plastic tote or Cambro. You're not actually floating the trays of grain on the water though, because that can cause them to overheat. Instead, you want to prop your trays up so that they're not touching the surface of the water, and there's room between them if you're stacking them vertically. Again, Eddie and Johnny have much more in-depth tutorials if you want to geek out on the setup. And to inoculate your grain, all you do is spread your inoculum over the grains, massaging it in with a clean or gloved hand. And then you wait. And wait. And wait. Compared to the timing of mushrooms, it's actually quite fast. My koji was ready in about 55 hours, and depending on the temperature, thickness of your grain layers, dimensions of your growing container, and the size and toughness of the individual grains you're using, yours will be around there, give or take a day. 48 hours is what the pros will tell you, and that's a great benchmark. Now, it does get a little complicated here, because koji, like mushrooms, generates a little heat as it eats. But unlike the slow pace of mushrooms, which makes that heat negligible to most growers, koji eats fast and makes a lot of heat. Within a day, your grains will be generating so much heat that they're climbing into the mid-90s, maybe higher. So it's best to keep a thermometer inside the grain itself, rather than just relying on the temperature reading on your immersion circulator. In-oven meat thermometers do a great job. That's what I used. Over the next day or two, you'll notice your grains taking on the white, powdery texture that is the mold growing mycelium over and into the grains themselves. The smell will change from that of cooked grain to a wonderful, intoxicating scent that's sweet like honey, but also has tropical, fruity notes. Mine smelled a lot like papaya seeds and ripe papaya fruit. Common descriptors are honey, cantaloupe, apricot, chestnut, and of course sake. But this process does not generate any alcohol, so you shouldn't be smelling anything boozy. If you do, that could be a sign of contamination. When your grains have woven together into a white, fluffy cake, they're ready to go. Get them out of the heat and chill them to stop the mold from growing. If you let it get too hot or stay in the heat too long, it will sporulate and develop unpleasant flavors. Not to mention, its spores will get everywhere. If you see signs of little yellow threads developing on top of your grains, not just white ones, that means the mycelium has shifted into reproductive mode and is moving dangerously close to sporulating. But done right, you'll wind up with this. This is rice koji I finished growing yesterday and popped into the fridge. Looks great, doesn't it? I used a hack that the pros use, broken rice. It's what it sounds like. White rice grains that have broken into small shards in processing. If you have an Asian grocery near you, they probably sell big bags of this, and it's always cheaper than whole rice because it's a byproduct that isn't desirable in all scenarios. But for koji it's perfect because it has far more surface area and no tough hulls, so it colonizes quickly and evenly. But I also made a batch with some of the rye berries I sometimes use as mushroom spawn, and that batch turned out great too. I broke up the cakes into individual grains to dry it, but here it is. You can see it looks a lot different. You can see the individual threads of mycelium on some of the grains. And compared to rice, which has more of those sweet aromas, rye adds a peppery spice that goes well with savory foods. I wasn't sure what to expect going into this process, and it was frustrating at first getting my cooler to work with the other gear, since I was leaning heavily into DIY and using stuff I already had here. But it was a fun process that I'll definitely do again. I'm going to be selling this at my farmer's market booth. Here it is, all packaged up to sell. Next week, I'll be back with a video showing one of my favorite ways to use koji: dry aging meats in only a few days in the fridge. But that's just one of tons of great ways to use koji that are easy and safe to do in the home kitchen. I'll put some links in the description to Eddie and Johnny's channels, where you can learn a lot more about the cutting edge of koji use, and maybe find some inspiration of your own. In the meantime, best wishes to you and your koji-kin. I'm Matt, and this is Phaewild.